Hello, this is AJ with Raconteur Animation, and today we're doing a tutorial about stand-ins in Arnold in Cinema 4D. I actually posted this tutorial a couple days ago, but I realized I missed some stuff, so I'm going to redo it and make sure I cover all those points. So stand-ins are basically ways to take a high poly count mesh or object that you might have, and it allows you to have it duplicated a bunch in a scene without putting a ton of strain on your scene and rendering. It's much more efficient for rendering a large amount of higher complexity models. And with the way you do it in Cinema 4D, it makes it so the geometry and shaders of all these high poly count models don't actually load until actual rendering occurs. So the viewport works much faster when you're working on bigger, more complex scenes. So for example, if you want to take this rock that I have in our scene, which is comprised of about 12,000 polys, and we want to duplicate it a bunch, if we just did that normally without using a stand-in method, we would be putting so much strain on our rendering, and it would take so long to get everything out. But with procedurals in Arnold and stand-ins, we're able to pump out renders faster and more efficiently. So let's get started. So we have a rock that we're gonna want to create a stand-in for. We have our textures set up and we're pretty much ready to go to export this. We have our textures loaded up and we're pretty much ready to go to export this into an ASS file. Before you do that though, I recommend going to your Arnold tab and going to your text manager. So now we're in our asset texture manager for Arnold, and we're gonna see our textures pop up here. And we're just going to want to make sure that the path is set to relative for these textures. The reason that could be a problem is because if you are sharing these files between people, or if you're planning on sending these files up to a render farm, it needs to have that relative pathing in the actual exported file in order for those renders to actually work and for the textures to show up. It's really important. Once that happens, you're pretty much ready to export this out now. We're just going to go up to the Arnold tab again, and we're going to go to Scene Export. This box will show up, and this is where all our settings for turning the file into an ASS file will happen. For the pathing for this export, I would path this to the current folder that your cinema file is located in. And I would do that for any ASS export that you are making. Put it in the same folder that that cinema file is in. For the format, we're going to want to keep it the ASS format, and for mode, we're going to switch this to procedural. For the objects tab, selected is fine. You just got to make sure that your object in the scene is actually selected. I would just make sure absolute paths is not clicked on, because we definitely want those relative paths for our texturing. And last, I'm just going to make sure this gzip compression is selected. Once you're all set, I would export out the file. So then what you can do is you can either create your new project, or you can open a project that you're already working on that you're going to bring that ASS file into. I'm just going to save this project into that same folder, and we're just going to call this file rock farm. If you look in this folder, you'll notice that it has the ASS file that we exported and also the cinema file that we exported the ASS file from. There's also going to be this texture folder, which is the folder where all of our textures for that exported file are located, and it's pretty important that you have all your textures located in a texture folder in the same folder as that cinema file. Making sure that all these files stay together and organized is really important in terms of getting everything to flow between each file and having everything work. Alright, we have our rock farm file, and now I'm just going to create an Arnold procedural in the Arnold tab. In the Arnold procedural object, you can come down to the bottom here by the settings and click on the ASS tab. This path is where you'll load your ASS file into. So we're just going to retrieve that and put it in there. Once it's pathed, you actually probably won't see anything show up quite yet. That's when we'll have to go to the main tab. We'll come down to the object display mode, and we're going to change that to shaded. So here is our object now, and like I said before, the shaders and a lot of the geometry actually won't load in until you start rendering. So you're able to basically duplicate this a bunch, then put it in a cloner, instance it, whatever you gotta do to multiply it, and then it will render everything once you get the Arnold renderer up. Other settings to be aware of include displaying the bounding box. You can choose whether to do that or not. You can also change the scale of the object as it appears. We'll just leave it as meters for now. So I added an Arnold sky and a floor object just to kind of illustrate what this can look like at render time. And before we get to rendering, I'm actually going to make a cloner, and I'm going to put the armor procedural in the cloner. So now the cloner is actually cloning that whole procedural, and it'll clone that object for as many times as we want. So I adjusted my cloner a bit, and I added a random effector to it as well to give it like a random feel for the layout of the rocks. Once you have everything set up and you want to take a look at your render, you can just pop open the IPR window now. And there we go. We got like a nice little scene of rocks, all with the texture on it. It just loads in at render time instead of in the viewport. Again, this is just a great method for getting in a bunch of high complex models into a big scene. If you're creating like a landscape, this process can really help with the rendering and the memory usage. It's definitely helped us with the big project that we worked on a while ago, where we had to have a whole landscape basically of these rocks and trees and grass. So I hope this tutorial is useful. Hopefully I hit everything that I needed to. I'm sure if I missed something, I'll probably just make a third one, but hopefully that won't be the case. Definitely important to make sure you're saving your files where you need to. Definitely take care in organizing your files and making sure everything's in the same folder, and having a texture folder for your file is really important too, just so everything can link together, and making sure your file paths are relative instead of absolute, so that anyone that can access the file as well as render farms will have the ability to actually access them, and it won't like error on their side. All right, hope you enjoyed and have a good day.